Jesus said, "A certain man had 2 sons. The younger son said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the inheritance.' Then the father divided his estate between them. Soon afterward, the younger son gathered everything together and took a trip to a land far away. There he wasted his wealth through extravagant living. When he had used up his resources, a severe food shortage arose in that country, and he began to be in need. He hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. He longed to eat his fill from what the pigs ate, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have more than enough food, but I'm starving to death? I will get up and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Take me on as one of your hired hands.' So he got up and went to his father. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. His father ran to him, hugged him, and kissed him. Then his son said, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But the father said to the servants, 'Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Fetch the fattened calf and slaughter it. We must celebrate with feasting. Because this son of mine was dead and has come back to life, he was lost and now he's found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. Coming in from the field, he approached the house and heard music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what was going on. The servant replied, 'Your brother has arrived, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he received his son back safe and sound.' Then the older son was furious and didn't want to enter in, but his father came out and begged him. He answered his father, 'Look, I've served you all these years, and I never disobeyed your instruction. Yet you've never given me as much as a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours returned after gobbling up your estate on prostitutes, you slaughtered the fattened calf for him.' Then his father said, 'Son, you are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is now alive. He was lost and is now found.'" The word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God.
Thank you. You did an awesome job. Good morning again. I just wonder, what is the most precious thing that you've ever lost? And so, do you remember how it felt as you searched for that? I can remember one time I lost a ring that my mom gave me. It was totally my fault. The kids had gotten a kitten, and I didn't know a thing about cats. And I had taken it off to do the dishes, and I set it on the windowsill. Forgot about it until the next morning, and apparently Kitty had gotten on the windowsill, and despite my taking the drain and everything else apart, it was gone. I never did find it, and so I don't know. When you lose something like that, it just stirs things up in your gut, and those feelings can be powerful. So on the other hand, sometimes we lose something and we find it. Do you remember what that feels like when you find something that you thought you'd never find, even if it's like your car keys? Doesn't it make you want to do a little bit of a happy dance when you find something that you've just kind of looked for a while, and all of a sudden you find it? Today's text follows the parables of the lost sheep and the woman who lost her coin. And at the end of both of those parables, they say, celebrate with me because I found what I'm looking for. It's true, when we find something that we've been looking for, we're joyful in finding it. On the other hand, lost and broken relationships tend to bring us more distress than losing an object of value or even our car keys. In today's text, as a result of a broken relationship, a father has lost his son, and this situation is a hot mess. It is just a mess. Not only has the son gone off on his own and done so to some unknown land, and dad's not exactly sure where he's at, his son also seems to have lost his direction in life. I can only imagine the nights that this father spent tossing and turning and wondering where his child was. Because as parents, we tend to blame ourselves when our children make bad choices. I'm curious as to how many times he questioned his parenting skills, wondered what he'd done to cause his son to be so irresponsible and insensitive and rude, demanding his inheritance long before it was ever due. I can feel that sense of uneasiness this father must have felt, knowing that this kid would likely make some really unwise decisions when he figures out what he'd really done. I don't know that we ever stop worrying about our children or if they're okay. I remember well the sense of worry that I had when my kids would be late getting home, or when I'd find out that they weren't where they're supposed to be, or even when I'm tracking Chloe on that little app and I find out, yep, she isn't where she said she's going to be. Are they okay? Where are they? And what's keeping them? As parents, no matter how young or old our children are, I don't think we ever stop praying for them. There's just a certain amount of comfort in knowing that our children are safe and well fed, and that they're headed in the right direction, that they're feeling happy, healthy, and whole, that they're going to make good decisions and wise choices in life. And when they don't, it unsettles us. It unsettles us. When our children hurt, we hurt. We want to protect them, and yet when we can't, we grieve. On the other hand, sometimes the end result is we become angry, we get bitter, even unforgiving. At other times, family relationships just get severed beyond the point of no return. I think we're all probably have a story somewhere in our lives about someone we love that went through a really rough spot in life and ended up in a hot mess, having to learn some really hard lessons. And in today's text, it seems to me that this young man has made an unwise choice, and he's going to have to learn the hard way. Any of you out there ever had to learn the hard way? I was one of those that always had to learn it the hard way. I never just got it right the first time. I've also at times questioned this father's wisdom in just handing over this kid's inheritance. I'll never forget my husband's comment the first time I read this scripture to him, and he said, well, that kid just needed a swift kick in the pants. Maybe. I mean, how dumb was it for dad just to hand over all this stuff? Who gives their child what they demand is theirs or their right? He could have said no. Dad could have said, I'm not doing that. On the other hand, I know sometimes, well, we got to have the wisdom to allow others and those we love to fail and to make those choices, do stupid stuff, even knowing that they're going to fall, and they're going to fall really hard when they do. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm just saying sometimes we got to do it. I think his father had the wisdom to know the difference between controlling his son's action and letting him go and learn to sink or swim. Maybe experience a little bit of both. The truth is, I never would have learned to swim if my daddy hadn't thrown me in the lake and said, go for it. Kick. Move your arms. I'm sitting here, I'm drowning. He's like, swim. I learned to swim. Not saying you did it the right way, but I did learn to swim. On the bright side of today's text, this kid, he does learn some solid life lessons about failure and his choices, forgiveness, grace, love, and restoration. All of this is to say sometimes families can be a hot mess, and you know what? Family life gets messy. I think it's safe to say in this text that Dad is a hot mess because he's grieving that his son is gone in his absence and his poor choices. The younger son's a hot mess because he's rude and he treats his father poorly. His rash and disrespectful behavior leads him to make some really poor life decisions, leading him down a path that doesn't end up serving him very well. Now the older brother, well, he's a hot mess too. He's nurtured his anger toward his brother and father to the point that he's become angry and bitter and unforgiving, and he's lost his ability to even celebrate that his brother's alive. What a mess. So let's dig a little deeper, because I think we kind of make a mistake when we think that this text is only about a child who chooses to walk on the wild side, or just a story about two kids. While it's true that both of these sons are lost, let's not miss that this text is primarily a celebratory text about a father who chooses to run towards someone who's wronged him and to offer him grace, forgiveness, and restoration. In fact, I would propose the text is more about grace and restoration than anything else, despite the mess. As the story goes that we just read, the dad has quite a bit, and out of the blue, the kid wants his money, so dad gives it to him. Divides up the estate. The younger son, well, he takes his share, and then he packs up his belongings, and he heads off to Tahiti, wasting his money on extravagant and wild living. And sadly, once his money runs out, well, so do his friends, so does the money, and he's hungry, and so he takes a job feeding pigs, something that no Jewish man would do, let alone consider eating the pig's slop. And so that's how down on luck the kid is. So in a desperation, realizing the error of his ways, he swallows up his pride and he goes home. And he expects to take a lowly position of a hired hand, but his father instead receives him. He embraces him with love and acceptance and throws a party on his behalf. Now, who does that? How many of you, after your kids made a really bad decision, went out and threw a party for them? Yeah, probably none of us. How many of you would do that? How many of us would think the best thing to do would be to essentially reward the kid's bad behavior by this party? Shouldn't there at least be a lecturer? Wouldn't it be wise to sit that kid down and at least say, hey, let's review how you got here. Here's the list of your sins. 1, 2, 3, 4. At least say, let me tell you about the pain you've caused us. Remind them, you don't get to just walk back in and not suffer the consequences of what you've done. You made your bed, we say, now lie in it. After all, isn't that tough love? Isn't that real love? I'm not sure I have the answer to that. However, I do think if tough love is to probably be found in this story, it comes at the beginning when the father gives the son the inheritance knowing it isn't going to turn out well for him, and lets the kid make that decision to take off and let him make his hard mistakes, fall on his face, drown in the muddy pig pen of his own making. Perhaps Dad understood that if his son was ever going to come to his senses, the kid had to just let things go. Now that's just my spin on things. Joyfully, though, the son does finally come around. We don't know how long it took. We don't know if it was days, if it was months, if it was years. But what's clear is that Dad waits it out. He didn't even go look for the kid. He waits it out. Now, one would think that before this kid reached the lowest point in his life, he'd have paused to think about his wild living and realized that he was in trouble before the whole train derailed, but he doesn't. It takes a lot of heartache before he stopped to examine his life and sought wisdom. Decided to take some steps to improve his position, and I think we can all understand that. Sometimes it takes a low point for us to come to our senses. It's true. It's often only after we discover that our wells run dry that we begin to make the changes in the way we're living. That well looks different for everybody. Sometimes it isn't until we've drained our resources before we realize, wow, I really should have done something different. In this case, the son comes to his senses when he realizes that he's literally starving, and that he would be better off as a hired hand for his father. The beauty of this is, for the son, when he comes to his senses, he becomes aware of his own sin, and that is the beginning of restoration for him. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. Now, I suppose in this parable it's fairly easy to identify where the blame lies. It's clearly, we say, with the prodigal son. However, in our daily lives, the truth is, the fault usually lies on both sides of the relationship when they become strained and broken. And what often occurs is, instead of both sides working together to heal and restore the relationship, we start pointing fingers and we place blame. No, that's not what happens in this story. The kid doesn't whine and doesn't blame his family, his fickle friends, but instead he takes that responsibility for what he did, and he owns his poor choices. And the same holds true for us. We can't blame others when our relationships become broken or stand on a mountain of pride. Instead, we have to humble ourselves and take the responsibility for our part. Or, if we're the ones who blew it, we have to own up to it and say, I blew it. So when we're in error, in order for any relationship to heal, we got to confess and recognize our own part in it and how we contributed to things. Said another way, when someone's harmed us, it's only when we come to our senses and choose to love others deeply that we have taken that first step toward restoring a broken relationship. The point is, both the father and the son had to choose to take a step toward healing the relationship. And so that is what empowers us to move forward and experience forgiveness. Acknowledging I was a part of it, and seeking forgiveness for God and those that we've hurt. Now, it's true, we can't control how others respond to us when we go and we try to repair a relationship. So we're going to have to choose how to respond when things get hot and messy. For example, let's not forget the other son, the one who stayed home and worked the farm and took care of dad, followed all the rules, and did all the right thing. When his brother returns home, what does he do? He throws a fit. He throws a fit. And he acts out in anger and bitterness and jealousy and resentfulness. It appears he's nurtured his feelings and frustrations against his brother for so long, he can't see any joy in his brother being alive at all. Now, I don't know, maybe he's embarrassed because his brother's behavior. After all, it's a small town and the whole town knows what he's done. All the neighbors know, the whole church knows, everybody knows. Obviously, he's angry that his father's throwing a party. He says, look at all I've done for you all these years, and you're going to throw a party for him? Are you kidding me? I think it's safe to say our gut reaction is sometimes to respond the same as he did. I mean, where's the justice for doing the right thing, for being faithful? Shouldn't the one who makes the good life choices be rewarded? One would think so. But this parable teaches us something different. It tells us there's a better way to respond. Notice the father reminds his older son of his blessings, that he's already been rewarded and is rewarded daily for his right choices. He says that you are always with me and everything I have is yours. And then he teaches them that despite his brother's foolishness, we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead, and guess what? Now he's alive. And the same is true for us when someone sees the recklessness of their ways and turns from the hot mess of their lives. We are called to celebrate. We don't have to remind them of the mistakes they've made. Guess what? They already know what it's cost them. What they need is to be restored to a right relationship with those who've been hurt. They need us to run toward them in mercy, grace, and love. You see, in this parable, when lives get messy, instead of justice, there is grace, and instead of a lecture, there is love. The truth is, love builds bridges, and we're called to build bridges of trust and grace. To move past the hot messes in life, because without trust and grace and forgiveness as the foundation upon which we build a relationship is not going to be strong enough to endure the heavy loads that life sometimes brings. So how do we respond? Notice how the Father responds. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. His father ran to him, hugged him, and kissed him. Notice this father takes an attitude of compassion toward his son, and more importantly, he doesn't even wait for the kid to knock on the door. He doesn't even wait for him to apologize before he runs to embrace him. The interesting thing is, in this text, the running father is really important. It's really important because in this time and place, men wore really long garments. And so in order to run, he had to lift up that garment. And in his time and place, that was considered the most disgraceful thing that a man could do. So why would he run? Why doesn't the father just wait? Well, Cohort notes that by Jewish custom, a young man who'd lost his family's inheritance in a foreign land and had the nerve to even return home would have been brought to justice through a custom called kazaza. And kazaza means to cut off. So when a community would discover that a son had disgraced their family and had made the choices that this son did, the community would have surrounded him and broken a pot at his feet, indicating that he was cut off from the community as if he'd never been born. The kazaza was a harsh tradition and one that no loving parent will want to see their child forced to endure. And this father knows the tradition, and he isn't going to allow it, even though his son's broken his heart. All this time, he's been waiting and watching for his kid to return, and he knows what's going to happen when they see the kid, that his son will be humiliated, a pot will be crushed, and his son will be forever lost to him. So before that can happen, what does dad do? He runs. He does something no man in that time would do. And he hikes up his robe and he runs. You see, they both know the custom. The son recognizes the mistakes and is prepared to return in shame. But the wise father doesn't wait because he knows unless he intervenes and shows mercy and disgraces himself by running in front of the servants, family, and village, the punishment will get to his son before he does. So he runs. And he embraces him. And he loves him, and he showers him with kisses. This display of love signals to everyone, especially that boy, that no pots are going to be broken that day. You see, I think amid our messes, no matter what our hot messes look like, we all want to have that one person who will run to us and embrace us, look at us with compassion despite the hot mess that we're in, and shower us with love. At the end of the day, that's how we respond to the messiness and to the broken people and to someone's messy life. We run to them. We love them with abandon, knowing it doesn't matter who's watching us or judging our decision to love. We run because love matters. Love matters. In today's parable, Jesus makes it clear. Even when we were miles away, God chose to run toward us on a mission. God chose to run to us and rescue us. Just as this father didn't wait for his son to apologize, God hadn't waited for us to apologize either. God died for us long before we ever sinned. It's already done. It's already done. And all we have to do when we're in a mess is run home into God's waiting arms and receive God's welcoming embrace. Because God is watching for us from a distance, hoping to see us come home. And when we do, God will run to meet us despite our hot mess. And God will celebrate our return. So as we leave here today, let us be those who run to restore and reconcile what is broken. Let us be those who run to and for God.